Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm so happy to be here with you all. I'm Andrea Fiorillo. I'm the head of research and reader services at the Reading Public Library. This event is recorded and will be available to registrants for the next month. I'm going to start with some thank yous. I want to thank Ariel Lewitton and the Tuesday Agency for working with me on tonight's event. I'm grateful to the Reading Public Library Foundation for making tonight possible, along with a coalition of over 24 public libraries throughout Massachusetts. From Athol to Ashland, from Williamsburg to Vineyard Haven, I won't list them all, but know that library workers help literature and democracy thrive, and I am honored to partner with all of you. Daniel Ford is tonight's moderator. Daniel is the author of Sid Sanford Lives and Black Coffee. He's the co-founder of Writer's Bone, a podcast that champions aspiring and established authors. He's the founder of the Writer's Bone podcast network. And by the way, tonight's event will be broadcast on the Writer's Bone podcast at a later date, so stay tuned for that. Daniel is also my new favorite person to talk books with. Isaac Fitzgerald is nationally recognized as a great person to talk books with, which he does frequently on the Today Show. You're kidding.
No, we still have you, Andrea. We still have you.
I guess I'm not live though.
I mean, I've got you.
Yeah, we got you.
My colleague,
everyone, hit us up on the chat. Can you see us? Can you hear us? Are we live?
My colleague was watching. She said she couldn't hear me, and neither could my other colleague.
I think.
Oh no, I've got yeses.
Yeah, we got you. Yeah, we're good.
Yeses coming in.
Okay, never mind that. We've had some technical glitches. I'm just gonna take back where I
live
left
TV. Love it.
Where were we? So Isaac Fitzgerald is nationally recognized as a great person to talk books with, which he does frequently on the Today Show. He's in the process of writing his third book independently, his fifth book altogether. Isaac is the best-selling author of children's book How to Be a Pirate and co-author of Pen and Ink, Tattoos and the Stories Behind Them, and Knives and Ink, Chefs and the Stories Behind Their Tattoos. His writing has appeared in the New York Times, The Atlantic, Esquire, The Guardian, The Best American Non-Required Reading, and many more. His new memoir, Dirtbag, Massachusetts, won the New England Book Award. In the words of the esteemed Roxane Gay, Isaac is, quote, charming and vulnerable, curious and candid, and full of dirtbag swagger. We welcome Isaac to share all of this fabulousness with us tonight. Isaac, please read to us.
I like to just clap. I like to just, these things where we're all from different places. But seriously, thank you so much, both to yourself, to the Reading Library, to all the libraries that helped make this happen. You have no idea how moved I am to know that 25 plus, 26, I believe was the final count, but so many libraries came together to help make this event happen. And of course, a big thank you to Daniel, who will join me shortly to have a conversation. And thank you to everyone who has come out tonight. Deeply, deeply, deeply appreciate you joining us here virtually. Like I said, I like to clap just because I feel like it can sometimes feel a little quiet. So feel free to clap along if the spirit moves you. And then the other thing I'll say, just it does seem like we're having a bit of technical difficulties, which isn't that a phrase we're all far too familiar with at this point. So if you're having a little bit of trouble hearing, or maybe you can hear, but you can't refreshing your browser, or maybe even closing out of it, just kind of grab the URL, close out of it, and come back. And it seems it's taking a couple of times, but so thank you for your patience with us. And without further ado, I'm going to read from Dirtbag, Massachusetts. This is the beginning of the essay titled Dirtbag, Massachusetts. And again, I just please know, I know there's a lot of different things you could be doing with your time tonight. So it means so much to me that you are taking time out of your evening to come to this. Dirtbag, Massachusetts. In 8th grade, I hit Dave Stoll in the face with my math book because he called me Tubby, like it was my name. Hey, Tubby. But really, I hit Dave Stoll in the face with a math book because I was mad. Mad at the insult, sure, but I was also mad at my parents and mad at my home life and mad at the world. A friend, Chad, had died earlier that year, a rare heart condition that didn't seem right nor fair. So little in life did. But also, Dave had called me Tubby. So I hit Dave Stoll in the face with my math book and watched as his body spun around and his face bounced off the locker behind him. You're lucky you didn't break his nose, the assistant principal said later as I sat in his office and stared out the window. I may not have broken Dave Stoll's nose, but it sure bled like I had. When people asked me how I got into boarding school, my answer was usually, I hit Dave Stoll in the face with my math book, which wasn't entirely true, but wasn't untrue either. My home life was, we're going to keep it family friendly. My home life was messy, but my grades were good and my standardized test scores were better. After the math book incident, I was suspended for a week. But because my school couldn't guarantee I'd be supervised at home, which was true of most students in my town, I had to have an in-school suspension. Every morning, I'd quickly finish the work I was given, and by the second day, I was spending my extra time helping out the school librarian or the school secretaries with their work. The librarian and the secretaries took notice. One of them was Chad's mother. She already cared about me as one of her son's close friends, and maybe wanted to help me realize that screwing up my life was pointless, even cruelly so, when kids like Chad never even got a chance to screw theirs up. There was a school she knew of, a boarding school. They sometimes offered scholarships to local kids, especially those who might be in trouble but showed quote unquote promise, whatever that meant. It might be a good option for me. The librarians would help me fill out the forms to apply. It was hard for me to accept help when offered. It still is. But they waited, kept offering, until finally I had to admit it was what I wanted. And I'm going to just leave it there. I'm going to clap. I know that I'm the only person in this room, but it just helps. But the reason I wanted to open with that, of course, is to just say a brief one more thanks to every single librarian and librarian worker and anybody that helped make this program happen this evening. Librarians have always been extremely important and extremely supportive in my life. And I am just so grateful for the many, many different ways that librarians have supported me. So I deeply appreciate that. And then without further ado, I believe Daniel's going to come to the stage and we're going to get into it. Or we might be having a little bit more technical. Oh, here we go.
No, here we go. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
I hear you. I see you.
Awesome. Well, that was a great reading. No surprise there. Terrific book. First of all, I want to echo your thanks to everyone behind the scenes, and certainly a thank you to Reading Public Library and Isaac for thinking of me and Andrea, of course, and letting me and Writer's Bone be a part of this. Isaac, as you were talking, I was wondering, you're a little removed from when you first put these words to paper or on the laptop. As the author, do they hit you any differently reading them now, or do they still hit that thrum on the same chord within you as you're reading them?
Oh no, absolutely. They hit me. They hit me a little differently, and as always. So just right then, I was like, all right, librarians. I want to give them thanks. I know there's a library shout out there at the beginning of this essay. Let's get into it. And then, of course, as I'm reading, I'm like, oh, also a ton of swear words for a 25 plus public library event. So did a little editing there on the fly. But no, for me, I've returned to these stories over and over and over again, and not, just as I was writing the book, but also just throughout my life. These are these core memories that have really stuck with me for years and years and years. That said, every time I return to them, there's a feeling of newness to me every single time. There's never a moment where I feel, oh, this one again, or like I could recite it off the top of my head. There's almost this part anytime I'm looking back over the book where I'm all of a sudden like, oh, right, we eventually, because going over it and editing it. And so it's like, oh, right, that story ended up in this place, and that ended up over there. And then the time that affected me the most or hit me the hardest was when I did the audiobook. It was this incredible experience to read the whole book for what I realized was probably going to be the last time, after working on it and working on it and working on it, to read it from cover to cover.
Was there a moment as you're reading your own work, and you had that writer thing like, "Oh man, who wrote this? I would change this word here, or maybe I'd have this paragraph here," or were you set? You were just trying to read the words as they were, and you didn't think about it.
No, the beauty. I mean, there's a few things here. One, I noticed in the chat that a couple of librarians are taking umbrage with the fact that they are saying we swear like longshoremen. So apologies to our longshoremen librarians out there. Those with a robust vocabulary. But to answer your question, when I was reading through, one, I will say this. There's still, I know for a fact on my audiobook, there are words I mispronounce. I know for a fact. Because
Sure.
you read it, and then all of a sudden you're reading out loud, right? But for the most part with my work, I try to read it out loud as much as possible. I don't have a ton of formal training. I say I have progressive views on grammar, which is just a very fancy way of saying I'm very bad with grammar. But so I try to read it out loud because that's how I find the rhythm is really in the way that it sounds. And I really enjoy that aspect of it. I really enjoy basically pages that can kind of flow very nicely and almost in an entertaining way when read aloud. It's something I always look for.
Got it. All right. So keep your writing process in mind, in the back of your mind for a minute. That's my next question coming up in a minute or two. But first, any of these essays could have been rendered in a fictional universe. And given how personal and heartfelt these stories are, I'm not surprised that you went the memoir route. But was it something, within yourself or these stories that made you stick to that rather than pen a short story collection or a novel?
Yes. And I have so many different answers that they're all trying to get out the door at the same time. Let me start here. There are names in this book that are changed. And then there are names that are not changed. And I talked to the person and they said, absolutely, it's A-okay. I'd love it if you're in there. And it shouldn't be that hard for you to figure out which are which is to say the names that I had to make up, I don't have a great imagination. Like the names that are real, like a great example is my boarding school roommate freshman year. His name is John Ritzman. Wonderful boarding school name. He's from Cape Cod. He's really from Cape Cod. I didn't have to change anything. And it was really wonderful. I got to show John that parts of the book that he was in. He read them. He said, absolutely, I love that. And so that made me, that was fantastic. That just worked so well. There are other names that truly, it feels like it's basically, I can't even come up with one right now. That is to say that my imagination can be somewhat lacking. And so I think for me, I've always, I love fiction. I devour fiction, but I myself can't picture. World building is something that I have such great respect for because I can't really see myself dreaming up these vast, giant universes. For me, I love nonfiction because in a way, it feels like the world presents, and the things happen. And it's not to say that sometimes it's not very hard to get at it, but I get the clay. And then it's almost a transcribing. It's just getting the words down on the page to describe the thing. And then I just have this pile of mud and you can go over it and over and over it again. The other thing, and probably more romantic way, that's kind of more the nuts and bolts of it. The more romantic answer is, as much as I do love fiction, I've always been so drawn to nonfiction. And writers like Roxane Gay, writers like Cheryl Strayed, so many of the books that I grew up loving, Bill Bryson, A Long Walk in the Woods. There's just so many wonderful nonfiction books. And I think when you're young, as a reader, I was drawn to fiction, of course, for escapism, right? But as a young reader, especially maybe if you feel a little closed off from the world, you also want to find out more about the world. So as much as I would be drawn to like the Fellowship of the Rings or the Hobbit or these incredible science fiction books, I was also drawn. Somebody tell me what the world is really like when you're young, right? That's what you're trying to figure out. How does this place work? And so I was drawn to nonfiction for those reasons. And I just feel so lucky to have been able to have so many wonderful authors that I look up to and admire kind of along the way.
Yeah, I swear we're going to get to your writing process, but did you look at your influences differently when you were going down the path of writing some of these stories? Did you go back to a Bill Bryson or Roxane Gay and read their work and are like, I'm looking at the structure here. What words did they use here, and how did they use dialogue in a nonfiction setting? Did that happen as you were writing this thing?
I think for me, it was more about emotional bravery.
Mm.
I mean, don't get me wrong, absolutely. Like Bill Bryson, hilarious, right? And so it's so wonderful to read writers. And David Sedaris, of course, another one that comes to mind, where you're just like, oh my gosh, look at how funny they are on the page. But then with Roxane and Cheryl and other nonfiction that I was and memoir that I was reading as I got a little bit older, what really resonated with me was the emotional bravery and the ability to kind of put something out there that is either hard to talk about or exposing themselves very vulnerable, and that is something, people always say you basically try to replicate your favorite writers, right?
Mm.
And as much as like one would think like, oh, that means kind of copying a style until you find your own voice, which I'm sure I did a lot of as well. For me, it was really about being like, wow, look at how brave these writers are being. Maybe I could even attempt to get somewhere even within the ballpark of that bravery. And that's definitely something I really read a lot of while thinking about this book.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad I waited for the writing process question, because that was a perfect segue. Walk me through what you do at the laptop. Are you trying to access that emotion before you sit down, while you sit down, after you sit down? What does that look like when you're doing the actual work of the writing?
Well, so for me, it's interesting. I that this is I love talking craft a little bit, because just for the record, the thing I always do is start with a disclaimer, which is there's no right or wrong way to do this. We all come to it our own ways. Some people seek out a higher education in it. Some people read a ton, and like I was just saying, some people maybe copy their favorite writers. Some people are like, no, I'm going to do something completely unique and absolutely me. Something else I always talk about, like for myself, I think if I'd written this book when I was 25, it'd be a lot different. There'd be a lot more anger and a lot less reflection. And who knows, the book that if I wrote it maybe when I was 40 might even be more empathetic. But when I say that, I want to be very clear. There are other people who are 25 or 15 who write incredible books, right? So there's no right or wrong time to do it. But for myself, I'd already done some books about tattoos. I had a kid's book. I was talking to my publisher at Bloomsbury, and I had this idea for almost a more, it was going to be a lot less cohesive. It was almost going to be like the Hold Steady essay in the book, which is a band that I write about, and the Fight Club essay in the book. Those are two great examples of what I thought the whole book was going to be, kind of looking at pop culture things and then talking a bit un petit, my own personal stuff, right? And a great example of everything we're just talking about. A great book that does that, and is still just like so incredibly powerful and so vulnerable, is Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay. So again, I was just like, oh, maybe, again, I could try and attempt to do my somewhat smaller version of all the great things that book accomplishes. What happened was, for 18 months, I tried that, and all of a sudden there'd be like 8 paragraphs about my dad. It was not so much un petit. I was like,
here it is. It's all right here.
What's going on? And I kept trying to push it away. I kept being like, nah, that's not. No, because I truly, if you'd met me in my 20s, I talk about it a little bit at the end of the book. There's a chance that I would tell you some of the stories that are in this book, but I was almost always like, I was so driven. I wanted to write. I was journaling. I was trying to figure out all of these things, but I was like, but I'm not going to write about that. And I told myself that for years. And finally, after 18 months and sweating a little bit because I wasn't getting anything in, I called my editor and I just said, hey, I think this might be more about my childhood than I originally thought. To which my editor responded, yeah, I've been waiting like 17 and a half months for you to figure that out. So that came as a great relief. And then to answer your question just straight up about my practice, I have always found that I will do anything but write. There are certain people who love, it flows
Amen.
out of them. They're moved by the muse. God bless them. And are certain people that are like, I'm very regimented. I have to do it every morning, which I will say, as I get a little older, that it has become true. Like early morning is usually, I don't know if that's, coming from a family of farmers or what, but like the early morning is when this is a weird way to put it, but it's what I say, like it's when I got the juice a little bit. I had the energy to really sit, but for me, that I'll clean the apartment, I'll do anything else. Sit down the laptop, I'm going to open up a tab. I'm going to find a friend's essay or a news article that I have to read first. So I have found, after a lot of trial and error, that long form, this longhand is what does it for me. Because as I said before, I have progressive views on grammar. My spelling's not incredibly hot. But if I do, so you're typing, all of a sudden there's red squigglies and you're rereading the sentence and you want to make it perfect. But when I do longhand, I can just go and go and go. And then when I type it into my computer, that's almost like a first pass, a first edit. And sometimes, don't get me wrong, sometimes I'm like, I can't read that word, or I'm like, I don't even know what the sentence just stops halfway through when I maybe got up to make a sandwich or something. But for the most part, that's how I make the play.
Yeah, I started my own podcast to avoid my own writing, so I know that routine. Yeah, makes total sense. And one of the through lines of this memoir is this idea of community. Both the one that you're born into, your blood relatives, your town, your state, your region, your religion, even, and your found community, your friends, your coworkers. Anyone that comes into your orbit that maybe doesn't share your DNA or your accent. Was that something that you thought about as you were writing? And what elements of your communities did you really want to feature in this book?
Mm-hmm. So just real quick, for those watching that are from Athol, Orange area, I lived in many different parts of Massachusetts. For those that have read the book, you'll know that. But we're all, for the most part, I believe it's mostly Massachusetts people here. So we all know Athol, Massachusetts, oftentimes very tongue-in-cheekly is called, we're all called massholes, and Athol is asshole, Massachusetts. Turns out publishers don't get excited about calling your book that. The point of that was for me like a pride thing. Like I wanted to be very like, the Quabbin Reservoir is so beautiful. As I just said in that essay, I was just pulling from so many public school teachers and then private school teachers and so many librarians and so many people along the way in the communities that I grew up with helped me. And and even my parent, where does my love of books come from? My love of books, my idea of education as a way of escape truly comes from my parents. So those were the things that I wanted to highlight. Again, the publisher was like, we don't know about that one. And my friend Jason Diamond, who's a wonderful writer, I was talking to him about it, and without even missing a beat, he just said Dirtbag, Massachusetts. That became the title. It kind of blew it wide open for me. But then something that I only realized through therapy, and that's something that it's a very big part of this book. This book would have been a much different book, and I would be a much different person if it wasn't for tackling therapy in a serious way. Again, no right or wrong way to do things. Come to it when you come to it. But if I could, a therapist, I hear my don't be hard on yourself. But I will say, I think I came to it a little later than I probably should have. But I'm very grateful that I came to it when I came to it. And so I was in therapy while working on this book, and it was my therapist who pointed out that a lot of the places that were supposed to be safe for me as a child were not. And in almost looking for that edge, I kept going to places that I thought would be a little dangerous. And what I found there was actually kind and caring and loving communities. And so again, I want to be clear, I feel very supportive in many different ways throughout my life, but it was my therapist who kind of pointed out that I kept running away from where I was from, seeking what I thought was danger, but actually surprising myself by finding so many people from all different walks of life, how kind and caring they were. So that was why, and again, that's why I'm so happy I wrote this book when I did, because I had the time to have that realization. Whereas if I'd written it, when I was in my 20s, I was full of anger, but didn't know how to express it. That would have been a much more tough edged and almost like, oh, look at me, look at how tough I am book. With this book, I really wanted to show how a lot of what I got through and to get to where I am today was because of other people's tenderness, because of other people's love.
And a memoir like this, you put it out into the world, and it's, again, so personal. It's part of you, and it evolved from something like, I'm going to write some essays and include some stuff, but the stuff ended up being the main thing. Did you ever imagine that this book would get the reaction that it has gotten during the past year? I mean, this book was everywhere I turned around. I saw Dirtbag, Massachusetts, and I fist pumped like every time. Like, yeah, that's right, love it. Does that fuel your creative tank for whatever comes next? And yes, this is a sneaky way of asking, hey, we want more from you. When's that coming?
I appreciate that. I truly appreciate that. Listen, I'm 100%. This is not like the life I created for myself was to talk about books on the internet. And I'd done that for a very, very long time. That means I've had front row seats to some people's incredible, incredible success. And I felt so lucky to witness that. That said, I've also had a front row. The publishing industry is hard. Books are hard. But another way of saying that is also books are magical. Like some books that don't reach an audience at all when they first come out, that's the book that you might dust off when you were a kid in a library, or some, future person will find in a library, and that will be the right book for them in that moment. And so that's all I was hoping to do. The only bar I had set for myself, it's a quote that I use all the time, and I mess it up, so apologies. It's a bridge quote, but it's from History Boys, which is a play. And the teacher's talking to the students and basically says, when you're reading, you can come across a line or a passage or a thought that you thought nobody else had ever had. You thought that was an emotion only you had had, or a feeling or a thought that only you had had. And all of a sudden, there it is on the page. And it's like a hand coming out of the book and grasping yours. And as a reader, it's one of the things that I just love about books. And it's why it meant so much to me that so many libraries came together to make this happen. Like books are a two-person, I mean, it's many, many people actually, but it's really a two-person art form. You have the writer and the reader. And when I describe a bar, I know what bar I'm thinking of, right? But you are probably actually pulling some totally different image up from your own history. All of a sudden, we're kind of making things together. It's your brain and the words on the page. It's one of the things that I find so thrilling. And it's also wonderful because every single person can have a different experience of the very same book. So that's very much part of the magic that I love. So all I was hoping to do was to be that hand for even just one other person, the way that so many writers had been that for me. And so when I started realizing that this book was getting so much support from librarians, from independent booksellers, from to have a review. I mean, it's even to be reviewed by the New York Times with the first, that's not everybody, there's limited space. Not everybody gets that. And the fact that it was Michael Ian Black, who is hilarious and could have just dunked. Could have just made, it could have gone so many different ways. Instead, he writes this incredibly thoughtful, real. And of course, I know because he writes especially a lot about masculinity himself. So of course, he's funny and he's extremely thoughtful. So I'm not surprised that it was thoughtful, but I was just so grateful. So to have that support going into it. And then, I'm not joking, Daniel. The fact that I'm sitting here talking with you, this book came out in July. It is now March. I just feel so grateful for people's continued interest in it.
Yeah, you really hit this out of the park, and that's a reading experience that I had. Reading that bar chapter brought me back to every dive bar I went to in New York City with my friends, and meeting the people that are close to me. My wife, the first time that we went to a bar in New York, it just all came back to me, and I was like, I got this from a super specific story from an author I've never met before, and I've never had this experience anywhere else other than New York. It's the beauty of writing. That's really what it is. And we have some great questions here from the audience. So I'm going to try to hit you with them on screen here. I think this is how I do it. Have your relationships with your family continued to evolve since publication? And thank you, KG, for that great question.
Wonderful question. Yeah. Yeah. If you finish the book, and this isn't a spoiler, so if you haven't, no problem here, but it was very important to me to not end it in a bow, to not end it with, and now everything's great. I myself am still an extreme work in progress. Therapy is ongoing. They don't give you a trophy and say, congrats, you're done. And so the way I choose to end the book is again, not a spoiler, but I knew I hadn't even done half the work I had to do to even talk with some of my family about what's in the book. And that was incredibly scary. And something, if I'm being honest, hindsight 2020, I probably was trying to put out of my mind a little bit. I was probably hiding from, because I knew that it would be so easy for me to just panic and just say, wait, stop, no. I'm going to keep a lot of it private, kind of at their request. But the thing that it just makes me, I was like, it's right there. It's a very emotional thing for me. So it's like right there at the, is that my parents and I have had some incredible conversations since this book came out.
Amazing.
We literally just saw each other a couple of days ago. I feel so grateful for that, because they have every right to have whatever feelings they want to have around this book as well. And anger is 100% something that I don't think anyone would judge them if that was their feelings. But instead, what has happened is we've had some real not wonderful, sometimes extremely hard, but some really honest conversations. And in a way, not just in a way, I think they didn't even realize how much I was struggling with some of this stuff. And I know that they didn't, because I was the one actively trying to hide it from them. And so for us all of a sudden to be able to communicate about it has been wonderful. And then and also and sometimes they're like, oh, you little jerk. Again, I keep most of it private, but right. I listen. This is. I'll share this one last little and she has every single right to. It's very easy for a mother would want to be like, yeah, but where are all the camping trips? There were a lot of camping. Where's the canoe ride? Like, come on, like where's and what I said to her was, and my mom, she, like I said, she loves books, she loves arts, she writes, but I was just like, the truth is a log. The truth is like a hunk of wood. And I carved this statue out of this hunk of wood. And I understand that the hunk of wood you would carve would probably look a lot different. And there'd be a lot more camping trips and a lot more canoeing trips. And she immediately got that. So sorry, I'm getting into it too much. But
no, that's all beautiful. And we came real close to making Isaac cry. So we're going to switch gears and ask you a funny one. It disappeared, but I remember what it was. Have you ever worked at the Petersham Country Store? Someone wanted to know.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I worked at the Petersham Country Store. I almost said I don't know if I should say how young I was, because I don't want to get them in trouble, but I will say I think it's changed owners. For the record, the owner was fantastic. Really lovely guy to give me a job. I don't think there was anyways, all I'm trying to say, I think it's like 12 when I started. I don't think anybody can get in trouble for that. But no, listen, Petersham is this wonderful community that I'm extremely fond of. If you ever get a chance, if you're driving, out on Route 2, great foliage. I do believe the country store is still open and operating. But I used to bring in the Boston Globe would get delivered, and on Sundays it came in 2 different sections. So, and basically everybody in town, very small town, I think it was 1,000 people when I was there, maybe even less than. I had to put every single the 2 sections together. There was a meat grinder that I wasn't meat slicer. I wasn't supposed to use it until I was 16, but I got pretty good at it. But yes, I used to work at the Petersham Country Store, one of many jobs that I had in the area.
Love it. I'm going to combine a few questions here. One of them I also had on my own.
I'm going to just say one. Just
Yeah, shoot. Yeah.
The last thing I do want to say about the family question, because I think when a lot of people come to an event like this, they themselves are maybe thinking about tackling their own story or writing their own memoir. And I think this is actually something somebody said to me, and I wish I could remember who it was. But somebody's the quote basically was like, give people a chance to surprise you. Give people a chance to surprise you. Again, not saying that sometimes it's not going to work out 100%. There's all sorts of, these are all very complicated things, right? But I think that's a great lesson to carry in your heart when you're writing is give people a chance to surprise you. You might think you really know how they're going to react, and it might be something completely different. Sorry, go ahead.
No problem at all. You have this pretty sweet gig recommending books on the Today Show. One, let me know if you ever need an assistant, co-star, coffee getter, whatever you need, I'll be there. And two, I know a lot of the folks on the chat are asking this. What are some books you recommend? Some books that you're excited about for 2023?
Oh wow. Let's see. Okay, yes. John Hendrickson, Life on Delay. Incredible memoir. Not to be like, I should be hyping my memoir, but here's another just fantastic memoir. John, I actually was in conversation with him at Harvard Bookstore in Boston, Massachusetts, during his launch week. He writes for The Atlantic. He's an incredible writer. The whole thing just moves. It's so wonderful. But he has a stutter. And so it's about his family life. It's about making his way into the world of words, into the world of becoming a writer with a stutter. It's so powerful, but also so fun, and a great snapshots of the time periods that he grew up in. So Life on Delay, I can't recommend it highly enough. It was absolutely fantastic. There is like a fun one that's coming out this week. I think today's Tuesday. It came out today. That I really love is a graphic novel, and it's by Leslie Stein, and it's called Brooklyn's Last Secret. And I'm not joking. Don't take my word for it. She plays in bands, and so she did a graphic novel just about a band on the road, and like people like the lead singer of Pavement and stuff have said it's like the best. It's like the only book, like the only that kind of form that has captured what it's like to be on the road with a band. So I love that book because it's fun and it's light, but Leslie Stein also had a graphic novel that kind of came out right as the pandemic was starting, called, I'm going to mess it up because it's a Grateful Dead song, and I always put an extra I Know You Rider, Know Your Rider, I Know You Rider, whatever the Grateful Dead song is. And that's a wonderful, like the band one's very, very fun. And this other one is extremely heartfelt. And it's about abortion, and I just absolutely loved it. So Leslie Stein is one that I'd look up. I could keep going. I promise to kind of to hold it down, but I can say the last one I can end with is this is surprising no one. This is like recommending the New York Yankees or the Boston Red Sox.
Oh wait, I can't. I'm in a Boston crowd. I can't reveal myself.
But listen. I think Colson Whitehead, obviously tremendous writer. We all know that. Everybody knows that. But the last one that he did about, kind of the characters living on both sides of the law is just fantastic. He's now said that he's doing a trilogy with these characters. So that second book is coming out. I have a galley of it. And so I haven't started it yet, but I cannot wait to, because I just think Colson Whitehead's having so much fun with those characters.
It really is amazing. I mean, you read something like The Nickel Boys or The Underground Railroad, and then you pick up Harlem Shuffle, and it's like, come on, how are you this talented? Like the rest of us are trying to make a living here, and we've got to read this from you, Colson. Like, come on.
But it's so fun. Also, shout out to Kathy Berner, who she said it's I Know You Rider. That's the Leslie Stein one. And then one last one, and then I'll stop, I swear. But Gone to the Wolves is a metal book that's coming out in May by John Ray. And if you're familiar with John Ray's work, like the thing to know about John Ray is that he just I feel like he just is doing a different type of book every time he does a different type of book, and every time he's just like knocking out of the park. So Godsend is incredible. Low Boy's incredible. The Lost Time Accidents is just this like giant, wild time travel book. It's fantastic. But Gone to the Wolves is like I'm not joking. It like starts in Florida, it goes to LA, and it's all like, it starts with like really like kind of dirtbag Massachusetts, like woodsy metal kids, but then they go to LA to get into like glam metal, and then it ends up in Scandinavia, and it's like it becomes like a dark mystery towards it's like it's anyways, I'll stop. Gone to the Wolves by John Ray, and then I'll stop.
All right, so I'm gonna have to go to the library because I can't afford all these books. I'm
That's
struggling right
fantastic.
here.
You love libraries.
That's
Yes.
exactly right. There's one more serious one that I'll hit you with after this fun one. Michelle is asking here, I'm surprised that you don't have a Massachusetts accent. Did you have one when you were younger, and where did it go?
I love this question. I of course, when the book launched, I had this incredible, I was so lucky to have this moment and very heartfelt moment with Hoda. And it was such a beautiful segment on the Today Show. But in my dreams, because I've never been invited on a Tonight, a late night show, but in my dreams, this would be the question that I'd get asked if I was, on a Seth Meyers situation, or, if we get to just use a time machine, Conan O'Brien or something. Because I love this story and it didn't make it into the book. So you should know that when I left Boston, I then, moved to North Central Massachusetts. Then I go to Cushing Academy. And again, I want to be very clear. This is one of those things where it's a childhood memory, a teenagehood memory. So I bet you nobody was thinking what I actually thought they were thinking.
100% accurate is what you're saying. This is 100% the truth.
No, it's 100%. It's funny how we can get caught up. When you're a kid, your world feels so small, so you think you know what everyone's thinking, but actually 9 times nobody cares. Nobody's thinking about you that much at all. But you don't know that yet. Anyways, this is all to say I get to this boarding school, and I had this lingering Boston accent, and all of a sudden, I was really in my head about going to this school. I was truly like, okay, it's time to be serious. It's time to be academic. I'm sure there are no troublemakers. And all of this turned out to be so false, of course. Like they were humans like everybody else was humans. And there were people from wonderful walks of life and hard walks of life and all different sorts of backgrounds. And some of them were jerks and some of them were lovely. That's just the way life goes. But in my head, I was like, okay, time to put all my terrible stuff behind. So I'm going to be a real student. And part of that in my headness about it was I was like, I can't have this accent. I don't sound smart, is what I kept telling. I felt with this accent because there were kids from all around the world at the school. And so I sat and I would practice. I would practice pronouncing my R's. I still say I dear. I still put the R's in the wrong places sometimes, but I really got good at smoothing out my accent until it was gone. And then the next year, because God's a comedian, a little movie called Good Will Hunting comes out.
Oh my God.
Good Will Hunting comes out. I'm telling you, people who had never even been to Boston, all of a sudden it was getting voted like sexiest accent. And it still does to this day. It's still like the number, like people love and I was like, if I had just waited 1 year, I would have had it now. I'm not joking. Friends in North Central Massachusetts, who I know they never had it. All of a sudden, I was coming back from school, and they all of a sudden had it was like they were from right down the street in South Boston. Anyways, I just was blown away by how popular I get. But that's why I lost my Boston accent.
Oh man,
I'm still heartbroken over it.
I tell you what, talking to Hoda would have been a good time to bring it back. I think, just midway through, just launch in and just see how she reacted. I think that would have been great live TV.
I love people in the chat are like, I love the boss. Exactly. I'm telling you, I think it would have helped.
I have affinity for both the Boston accent and the Long Island accent, and neither one of them I would describe as sexy. But I applaud the people who find it sexy. Whatever, we're not kink shaming here; it's fine. I want to end with this question because I think it's a really thoughtful one, and I feel like I'm stealing this from my friend Mark Cecil, who does the Thoughtful Bro over at A Mighty Blaze, and yeah, I produce his podcast in the podcast world. What are some of the things, or one thing, one important message that you'd like readers to take away from this memoir?
I know earlier I kind of said you should give people in your life, your family, loved ones, a chance to surprise you. I want to be very clear. I haven't even gotten here yet, but I'm working on it. in therapy. If somebody reads this, I mean, and I want to, that's what I was setting out to do. Like, I cannot wait for this book to be out in paperback, because my dream is it's just folded in half and just stuffed in the back pocket of some like 15-year-old, 17-year-old kid. You know, like I want somebody to value. I just think back to certain books like The Chocolate War when I was just these books that I discover. You know, I can't wait for it to just be crumpled up and stuffed in somebody's back pocket, and I hope to find it a little helpful. And if they were to take like one thing away from it, it was, you know, I was saying loved ones, give them a chance to surprise you, but also give yourself a chance to surprise yourself. I think we're so desperate to try and figure ourselves out, especially when we're growing up, that we want to, oh no, this is who I am. I know now. And it's almost the lesson of a lifetime, and one that I wish I'd learned a lot earlier if I could have. That it's okay. You're going to grow. You're going to change. You're going to be different people. And if you give yourself enough love, if you give yourself enough room, you can grow into something beyond what you thought was possible. And I mean that in respect to, you know, forgiving people in your life. And I don't mean forgiving just like, oh, it's okay, it's all, but like having those real conversations that lead to real forgiveness, and loving people in ways that you didn't think was possible. That's what I hope somebody, to just give yourself a chance to surprise yourself, because you are capable of so much.
I love that. I'm not going to step on that. I'm going to swing it to Andrea. But Isaac, thank you so much for chatting with us. And you know, we'll talk offline about some other stories and some other books you got percolating. You know, we'll talk books and writing somewhere down the line. But it was great talking to you. Thanks so much. These words are great. Keep up the great work.
Hey, Daniel, thank you for the great questions, and thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Hi, everyone. I think many of you missed me in the beginning. Or like you could see me but not hear me, or hear me but not see me, or neither of those. But I gave a great introduction. I really chatted up Daniel and Isaac. You're gonna have access to the recording of this event for the next month. So hopefully you can go back and watch it. I also gave a lot of love to my fellow libraries throughout the Commonwealth. I want to say thank you so much. You're all heroes. You do the hard and good work for your communities every day. I also want to say that Daniel's podcast, for those of you that did not hear me, The Writer's Phone, Daniel himself is a writer, and he sits around and talks with writers all the time. Tonight's event is going to be broadcast on a future episode of The Writer's Phone. So I'm going to put that into the chat before we leave, so that you all are primed to go and look for it later on. And I have to also thank the Reading Public Library Foundation for putting in some bank to make tonight possible. So I appreciate that. And thank you to the Tuesday Agency that hosted us on Crowdcast today and helped make this event happen. Sorry it was bumpy in the beginning, but it was a great event after all, with Isaac and Daniel's wonderful words and all of your questions. I wish we could have got into all of them. So thank you so much. And if you haven't already read Isaac's book, pick it up at the library, go buy it. I know, support your local bookstores. Don't order it online. Don't be that person. Go to your bookstore and make sure you get it. And that's it. Thank you.
And I just one quick, I want to say, and also if you do go to the library to go pick it up, or just go pick up any book, you know, bring something. Librarians right now are the front lines of so much stuff that's going on. And there's a lot of stress that comes with a job that is, you know, I think in a perfect world, teachers, librarians would be paid king's ransoms. So just, you know, I don't know, bake some cookies, bring a treat, just any acts of kindness towards librarians right now who are really fighting on all fronts. So please support your local libraries. Obviously, yes, support your local independent bookstores as well. But try to any way you can brighten a librarian's day, try to do it.
We love that. Thank you, Isaac.